thing to do is have a moratorium. Law change will always stir up the right-wing opposition, but having a moratorium on the prosecution will affect a major change in terms of these people's lifestyle and allow them to access cannabis reasonably in the short term while the formal system is actually created and put into place.
We agree with that. We don't believe that the state or the Commonwealth or somebody on Facebook or Joe Blow down the street should dictate your health or my health. It should be in consultation with the doctor and the patient, and that is what the American model very much follows in the States. And a lot of the states have come out with that now. They've made it very clear it's between the doctor and patient, and they're no longer restricting conditions to, just the more serious. What we've got in our proposal, though, is that as far as it goes, we need the applications processed as a priority for people like Lene, for kids with epilepsy, for people with brain cancer, terminal. We need that process straight away, but we can't have people left out. I mean, we're all equal, so it's just a process of getting through the priority applications. Now, the courts have said over and over again that it's our right to do what we want with our body. We've outlined that in this proposal, and that's how it should be. Here in Queensland, people have been sitting on Supreme Court charges some people have been sent to Supreme Court for 128 grams, which is a very small amount. Now, that affects them in so many ways, and that's what we have here in Queensland. We did challenge it years ago, and that practice stopped, but a lot of people in Queensland actually have Supreme Court charges. So we wonder why people don't speak out, and we want to do something about that. A lot of people are trying to grow their own medicine, make their own medicine, but there's parents trying to look after their children that are on those Supreme Court charges for very small amounts, and they're a double whammy, of losing their children. No parent should have to go through that. Now, what we want the Queensland government to do is immediately amend Health Regulation 270A. It's a quite simple amendment, and what it will do is stop this prohibition. At the moment, it's in conflict with Commonwealth law, because at the moment, at Commonwealth law, you can get access. We've proved that with how Lene is going through. Sure, they're holding it up, but there's access there. What is happening here at state law under 270A, they're saying no access. Well, we're saying that's in conflict. We want that changed so that everyone can have access that needs it, and not just the patients, we want the carers. We want to be able to come under our doctors and out of the police law. So that's basically what we're trying to do. What's the reason behind the
Here's the microphone here. Hello. Come around this one.
Hi, I was just wondering why you were sort of going down the path of taking it or trying to put it through the TGA. I mean, the TGA is an independent organisation which is funded by the pharmaceutical industry, and if you put any product up to the TGA, so I'm just curious because there was a bit of a sort of a red component. Very good question, and we'll clear it up. This is not for a product to be approved. This is lawful access on a patient case-by-case basis. And this is between Lindsay's doctor and Lene's given informed consent. It's a temporary measure. And what it is the products from overseas are being given by a compassionate supplier. We're not trying to get them onto the Australian market, no. Thank you, that actually clarifies it.
Directly to the patient, yes.
So obviously, because Lindsay's had tested medicine in America that's specific ratios, and because we don't have access to testing here right now, what we're finding is he can respond really well on what he was on in America, but when we come back here and he's on something else, he's not responding as well. Okay, so he might be getting results sometime on a certain strain, and then other times he's having breakthrough seizures. And because we can't literally walk into a lab and get it tested like we could in Washington State, it's an unknown quantity. We know that it's quality oil and quality extraction, but we don't know the exact cannabinoids. We can only estimate by the strains that are used to make that oil. And looking at what those strains generally stack up at, approximately online for that type of strain, blend a couple together to try and get the best ratio, if that makes sense.
Do you know the ratio?
Well, he was on a 4 THC, 1 CBD in the US.
That's easy.
Yeah. And if you can get strains that are that, it's just hard to get them here regularly. And I just want to add too, when I was talking about patients' needs and different conditions. Now, I was a little bit concerned. I heard something just a couple of weeks ago from one of the epilepsy organisations that there was some talk from the government at looking at being very distinctive with which conditions would be approved for medical purposes. And I think Dravet syndrome was one that they were being very selective on, and that would leave all the other epilepsy syndromes out, and that was very scary to hear that. So I think it's very important that no matter what we do, we always have that clause in there where the doctors can decide, because there are rare conditions. And something that I found in America was that even though their list is quite long of the conditions that are allowed for medical use, and it varies from state to state because it is a state-based system over there, that there's always been, in most of the states where the CBD and THC is allowed, not just a CBD only state, but there's always that clause to allow for the doctors to make that decision, because there's all these rare diseases that can benefit.
I think the low toxicity that you spoke about is something that needs to penetrate to the medical world. I know there's concern about the impact on brain development of teenagers of using THC-based to some degree, and certainly psychiatrists are saying it can alter the trajectory of a mental illness that might be coming. So they need to be satisfied.
This professor you're talking about, several years ago, I was debating with George Patton. I don't know if you remember him. He's a fellow in South Australia that proved that if girls used pot when they were younger, they ended up with adverse outcomes at a later stage. Now, George got a huge, like a blizzard of publicity across all the major media outlets with this, and I was invited onto the Willisey show to debate with him. Now, I went through his research data, and what he'd done, he hadn't actually, you know how we talk about controlling for variables? He hadn't controlled for the fact that a lot of these girls have been arrested and given criminal records and were excluded from employment and all other sorts of things. And basically the only thing he proved, if you bust someone, give them a criminal record, their life might get knocked off their trajectory. Unfortunately, I was young and stupid then. I didn't keep my powder dry. I said, I'm going to cane you out there, Patton. I said, I'm on to you. And he cancelled the debate. So what I learned there is sometimes better to keep your mouth shut. Right? Now, in terms of testing, this is critically important. The gold standard of testing is what they call the HPLC machine, the high performance liquid chromatography. Now, back in the happy days, most people don't know, but in New South Wales, back in 2000, we actually had a licence to grow drug cannabis. We'd set up a huge indoor shed. We had 10,000 watts of light, and we were planning more. That was operating through legislation that currently exists, 23(4)B of the Drug Misuse and Trafficking Act. But even though we set up the HPL machine at Southern Cross University and paid for it, we're now excluded from using it, and it's only being used to do compliance testing for the hemp licensing. Sydney Uni is an HPL machine, and I've had tests done there on a mate basis in the past, but now the Chief Health Officer has prohibited them from cooperating with us. So our response to that, and I mentioned it briefly during the talk, you can now do, it's going back 50 years of technology, but using thin layer chromatography. It's nowhere near as good quantitatively, but it produces a very clear understanding of whether you've got a CBD or a THC and the semi-quantitative analysis. So we hope to be launching some sort of consultancy in the next 3 months or so.
I'm just interrupting here. As I said, I wouldn't mind putting this resolution to the meeting, but I'll put it to the panel first because, as I said, I sent it out. I got one person who didn't like it, but didn't tell me why they didn't like it, and I got one person who said it was great. And so I haven't really had too much feedback on it. And I've suggested other people should consider putting resolutions to the meeting. So you can modify the resolution I'm suggesting. I just want to find out what the panel's view is and how whether they agree with it or they'd like it modified in some way so we can put it to the meeting. So my resolution went like this. This meeting asks the government to introduce a regulation in the appropriate legislation to make it clear the laws on cannabis prohibition are meant for non-medical use and should explicitly not apply to medical cannabis users. The Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, which the Commonwealth of Australia signed on behalf of the states, says in its opening sentence that the convention does not apply to medical or scientific use and repeats the assurance on several occasions throughout the document. Under the Single Convention, which is the basis of cannabis prohibition worldwide, not just Australia, Australia and Australian states have to permit the medical use of cannabis. So that's the resolution as it is. So if you want to sort of, give me feedback on it or think of ways you could adjust it.
I'd just like to add, this is something that I'd like to get people to understand, and it's not well known, and we're trying to get the message out there. But Queensland have not adopted the Therapeutic Goods Act, and that's what's holding the other states back with production of oils. But any state can change their laws to give you protection, to allow you to grow your own cannabis for a cooperative. That's a state issue. What is happening at the moment is because Victoria have the hemp industry and Tasmania have the hemp industry, and same with New South Wales, they are so tied up with the Therapeutic Goods Act, they are trying to go under that Commonwealth framework. We need to move away from that. We're talking about cannabis here. We don't need to go overboard with regulations. Our Health Act here has adequate standards, adequate regulations that a good quality controlled product can get out to people who don't want to grow their own cannabis. Especially. Yeah. Yeah.
I've had business in it, and I've had numerous, and I
Well, what I think the thing is people that a lot of people have had to do what they.
I'd like
but the resolution for me would be to change 270A and allow lawful access.
Yeah,
that's what we need. That starts the process going.
So you'd agree with the first part that the what does the first sentence go? This meeting asks the government to introduce a regulation in the appropriate legislation to make it clear the laws on cannabis prohibition are meant for non-medical use and should explicitly not apply to medical cannabis. Do you agree with that? Yeah.
The problem with that, it's always hard politically to know for whether you go for bracket creep or whether you go for all at once. Why are we selling ourselves short? The real social advantage of law change comes when you legalise cannabis across the board, as in Portugal. That's when you get the real benefit, and you don't have to tie up your poor patients with a lot of regulation as well. Right? Yep. So I'm just questioning, are we going to do it? People accuse me of bracket creep by going industrial first, then you want medical, but you really want recreational. Sure, but I want the other two first. Right? It just depends on the order that we attack them. Hey?
All right, but okay.
I don't know the answer.
Right.
The international treaties only allow for medical use or industrial. Industrial was never ever meant to be prohibited like it was, and that's in the treaty. So we need medical and research. And as far as it goes, Queensland it's not really tied to
that international law as much as the other states because we didn't adopt the Therapeutic Goods Act.
Look, I don't think that's right, Grace. I'd have to sort of disagree with you on that. I think,
we do have to.
The basic situation
as a
is
nation,
Australia signed it as a Commonwealth, and the Australian government then levies the states into passing appropriate legislation. So, you know, like the fact that the Commonwealth signed it, they then enforce it on the states.
But we are in a unique.
When I was going through the legal procedure with the big hemp crop in Dungog in 2005, my argument was that the single convention said Article 28.2, it shall not apply for the industrial production of seed, fibre or for horticultural purposes. So therefore there was no action against me. They claimed then that even though the Commonwealth had signed it, the states hadn't individually ratified it. So I was being prosecuted. This is what they told me. I didn't believe it, but what can you do?
Yeah, no, that does. Okay. Sandra, you want to say something?
John, I would support that submission, not because I don't think something bigger wouldn't be better, but we've got to be realistic about what the government will agree to. And it would be hard for them to say no to that, or much, much harder than a bigger submission. So other people can put other submissions, but I think that's one that I and probably many others here could easily sign. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
It's utterly reasonable.
Okay, John.
I would support John's motion as well on the same grounds. When I did appear before the Senate committee when they came to Brisbane talking about the regulator of medicinal cannabis bill, I did say basically that we were going through all this nonsense because cannabis is illegal, and it was like I was. No one wanted to look me in the eye because I was saying the wrong thing. They all just wanted to tiptoe around the fact that cannabis is illegal, and that's why we're in this total mess about dealing with research and kind of the application of medicinal cannabis. There's so many, if it wasn't illegal recreationally, we could just go ahead with all the research and stuff on the merits, and it would just be a completely different situation. So it is mad, but at this stage I think we play that little game until we can do something better. And if I could just say about the moratorium issue, all premiers in Australia have said that somebody who's busted with possession of small amounts of cannabis and has a terminal illness will not be prosecuted by the police. All the premiers have said that. They've left it up to the discretion of the police, which is unsatisfactory, but at least they've said that.
All right. Well, I'll put that motion to the meeting. I note that Andrew doesn't think it goes far enough, and I have no problem with that, Andrew. But I'll read it again and I'll ask people to vote on it.
We'll get it. Yeah.
All right.
It's a stepping stone.
Yeah. All right. Fantastic. Okay, now look, in terms of time, we're supposed to be out of here by 4, and I will have to check on that. 3:59? Well, I'm afraid we'll have to close it down at this stage. Now, the Southeast, a short question here, but before then, the Southeast Queensland Hemp Embassy who have been doing that stall for us there and has sort of been providing us with things, who I think we should thank Nate and Belinda for doing that. They want to see if those who want to sort of hang around and talk to them and, join up with